Hello, 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 and welcome to a quick overview of Victoria 3 Dev Diary number 145, Military Improvements. The upcoming 1.9 update is shaping up to be a massive change to the game. The previous Dev Diary outlined the changes they're making to the trade system. They had mentioned they were making some small tweaks to the military and war. Well, these are technically small changes, but the positive effect on gameplay sounds like they're going to be massive. So if you're a busy gamer on the go and don't have time to read the full Dev Diary, here is a TLDR rundown of the changes. If you want to read the full Dev Diary, the link is in the description. Otherwise, here we go. One of the things they're going to change is how front lines get generated, and something you hear people talk about a lot called front splitting. Basically, when you are in war and you have a single front, when the front changes, it might split into another front or multiple fronts. This is always a big annoyance because it affects how you manage your armies in war. In the Dev Diary, they said they're going to change and implement a new algorithm that will connect fronts that previously wouldn't be connected. They use the example of India when the unstable Raj journal entry fails and the princely states revolt. It always turns into such a visual mess. Here's an example they gave of what the current system looks like. They said with this new algorithm, when the princely states revolt, the fronts will now look like this. Now you just have two fronts here and here. This will be a massive improvement. If it will do this in India, you can imagine it will be much better all around wherever your game takes place. So technically fronts will still split, but we can say goodbye, hopefully, to weird front splitting. The next two elements were things they said are more under the hood changes. The first one is something they revealed about how the front system works behind the scenes called front camps. This will address that weird thing you see sometimes when an army starts moving to a front they were already at. Or if a front changes, say because you advance the front, your army will march to the opposite side of the front instead of just moving forward. They revealed that behind the scenes, your armies are in what they call a camp. I imagine the visual in the game looks like this. When a front moves, an army would look to move their camp to be repositioned along a front. And if there wasn't room on their side of the front, they would march to the other side of the front. This was a problem because it allowed your opponent time to reach the front before your army does and gain ground. They said they're changing the algorithm on this so that your armies don't march to the opposite side of a front for no reason. The next thing is the infamous teleporting army. If you browse any message board for the game, you'll find people screaming about why their army suddenly teleported halfway across the world back to their homeland during a war. It doesn't happen a lot, but when it does, not only is it annoying, but it can also drastically affect the war. This happens when, for whatever reason, an army doesn't have a front they can reach. Say the front they were at disappeared. If there's no new front for them that they can actually get to, they'll just teleport back to their home HQ. To solve this, they're creating something called an exiled status for an army. If a mobilized army cannot reach a front, they are now considered exiled. They provided this image to show how you will see when an army has this status. This icon here means that two army and one army are now in exiled status. When an army reaches exiled status, they start searching for the nearest friendly HQ. So not necessarily your home HQ, but just the closest friendly one. And they don't teleport there, they march. So you will have time to notice it before they get too far. Exiled armies can march through neutral and enemy territory because they can't be attached to a front until they reach the target HQ. I imagine this means you can also change the friendly HQ they're going towards. You can't redirect them to a front, but you can change which HQ they march towards. However, they will suffer attrition and organization loss while marching towards the friendly HQ. And speaking of organization, this mechanic has become much more important. A reminder of what organization is. Each army has a maximum amount of battalions based on how many generals the army has and the promotions for that general. If you go over the cap, you start to lose organization. For example, let's look at this regular army. It's at 100% organization. Now, let's fire their general, Edmund P. Gaines. And unpause the game for a moment. You'll see here the organization immediately goes to 25%, and you see the penalties the army now has. So the organization drop is immediate. Now, let's hire a new general. And unpause the game. Now you see the organization is slowly being gained back over time. So the loss of organization is immediate. The gain of organization takes time. So one thing they're changing is the loss of organization will also take time. If a general dies and the army is over its battalion cap, you won't immediately lose a bunch of organization. Another change right here is that an army that has no generals can now have up to 10 battalions at full organization. This will be very helpful, especially when moving troops, or you get those random armies that are created when hiring conscripts during war. Something that I think is going to be a massive change is that now supply affects organization. Currently, if your army isn't fully supplied, so for example, you have input good shortages in your barracks, or your convoys are being raided and you're suffering input good shortages, the penalty your army suffers goes towards morale. When an army has low morale, they retreat from battle faster. So that was the benefit of convoy raiding. Disrupt your opponent's military goods supply chain and make them suffer low morale. Now the supply shortages will make the organization of the army go down. Let's go back to the regular army here and look at the penalty this army is suffering for being at 25% organization. A hit to offense and defense, and a big hit to recovery rate, along with morale recovery. This makes convoy raiding in war much more lucrative, and vice versa, it makes your convoys being raided much more devastating. There is going to be a change to how navies work in the 1.9 update. They haven't gone over the changes yet, but I imagine they work alongside this change to supply chains in war. A big change, too, is the new diplomatic agreement military access. You will have a new diplomatic agreement you can create with a country that gives you military access, meaning you can march soldiers through their land and create a front with your enemy at their border. There's actually a lot of intricate details they go over with this, but to keep with the theme of TLDR, in a nutshell, what this amounts to is you can now do something that resembles a naval invasion, but overland with your armies. With naval invasions, you select an enemy state on the coast, you select a navy and an army, and they go to that state and engage whatever armies and navies are stationed in that HQ. When your armies face off, if the defense wins 3 battles, the naval invasion fails. If the offense wins battles, there's a bar going from 0 to 100, and if it reaches 100%, a new front is created. Now you will be able to do exactly this, but with an army over land. Now there will be a button labeled Plan Invasion. They point out this won't be under the Navy screen. It just is for now in this image. You see all the states in green here are on the coast. These will be naval invasion options. But over here, you see the states of Champagne and Lorraine. They don't have a coast, yet they also are in green now. This will be a land invasion. So, for the example, Prussia can make a diplomatic agreement with Belgium, since the border of Champagne and Lorraine is on the border with Belgium. Belgium can grant military access, so Prussia can do a land invasion of either Champagne and Lorraine. This will change the strategy in war massively. Because before, if you were a landlocked nation, you were safe from many other countries. For example, I've done a lot of runs with Kabul, and most times I start wars with my neighbors, in order to gain land and eventually form Afghanistan. When I start those wars, usually Russia will join in on the opposing side. I've never cared about it because at the game start, Russia can't reach Kabul since Kabul is landlocked. Now it will matter a great deal. Russia can get military access with Bukhara, and suddenly the entire run with Kabul is vastly different because now any little war I start, when Russia eventually gains these states, which they will, they'll have a land border with Bukhara, they can get military access, and they can just march straight over to my border. And entirely changes the way that you play with Kabul. Lastly, they went over some UI changes they're making for the military. The mobilization option screen will be cleaned up. Something exciting is the stacking of allied and enemy forces on the map during war. You see this image, this is what it looks like now. If you have a war with many armies, it will just look like a mess. It will now change to this. You won't have to zoom all the way into the map to see your -17 score because you're trying to get past all of the army icons. Like I said at the beginning of the video, technically most of these changes are small, but the effect on gameplay is going to be massive in a great way. The 1.9 update is shaping up to be the biggest update they've ever made to the game, and personally, I cannot wait for it. All the changes mentioned in this dev diary will be part of the free 1.9 update, so everyone will get these changes. Remember, this is a TLDR rundown of the dev diary. They go into much more detail on these things. The link to the full dev diary is in the description, and it's worth giving a read. As always, thank you for watching, and be awesome.